Reborn, the day the real heiress arrived. I knelt first. Thank you for raising me, father and mother. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. It's just that Weiniing has had a hard life. She wouldn't dare hope for her father and mother's affection. Since my elder sister has already grown accustomed to life at the Marquis' mansion, Weiniing would never take what belongs to others. As long as she can stay by my parents' side, even if it means serving as a lowly maid to my elder sister, Weiniing would be perfectly content. The excruciating pain in his throat, as if it were being seared by arsenic, seemed to have barely subsided when the soft, melodious, and heart-wrenching lament began to ring in his ears. I slowly opened my eyes, and my vision gradually cleared from a blur. There was no dark, damp woodshed, no excruciating pain from the tendons in my arms and legs being severed, and certainly no sight of Mo Qinghan's hypocritical and hideous face. The first thing that caught the eye were the several stately rosewood armchairs in the main hall of the Marquis of Dingyuan's mansion. The Marquis' wife, Lady Rong, was holding a young girl, dressed in a coarse cloth jacket and skirt, her face streaked with tears, tightly in her arms, weeping as if she were losing her own flesh and blood. The Marquis of Dingyuan, Yen Changyuan, sat upright at the head of the hall, his brow deeply furrowed, though he did not shed a tear. His eyes were filled with deep emotion and heartache. Standing nearby was my eldest brother, Yen Qingzhan, the crown prince of the whole mansion. His eyes, as sharp as an eagle's, were now calmly scanning back and forth between me and the young woman. I've been reborn, and I've returned to the day when the real and fake heiresses were reunited at the Dingyuan Marquis' mansion. On this day in my past life, upon hearing Su Weiniing's words of concession and forbearance, I, out of my deep attachment to the parental love I had received over the past 14 years, disregarded proper etiquette, knelt at the Rong family's feet, wept bitterly, and begged them not to send me away. As a result, not only did I come across as a vain, scheming villainess who had usurped another's place, but Su Weiniing also seized the opportunity to feign illness and faint, thereby cementing the accusation that I had oppressed the true heiress. That farce drained the Marquis' household of every last shred of compassion they had for me. Having been given a second chance at life, as I watched Ms. Rong gently pat Su Weiniing on the back with the tenderness of a mother, my heart remained utterly unmoved, filled only with the cold, unyielding resolve forged through life and death trials. I took a step forward, knelt upright in the center of the hall, clasped my hands together, and bowed to the ground, performing the most proper and impeccable traditional noble bow. The dull thud as his forehead hit the ground brought the sobbing in the hall to an abrupt halt. Tingxue thanks father and mother for their 14 years of care and nurturing. I sat up straight, my back perfectly erect, my voice cool and calm, without a trace of trembling or resentment. Since my younger sister is the true blood of the Marquis' household, these past 14 years have been a blessing I've stolen. Now that the truth has come to light, Tingxue would never dare to cling to even the slightest bit of the Marquis' estate. I will return to my room shortly to pack a few old garments, vacate the agarwood courtyard, and return it to my younger sister. As soon as those words were spoken, the room fell silent. Rome forgot to wipe away her tears and stared at me blankly. In her original expectations, I, the pampered, haughty legitimate daughter of the Marquis' household, should have been weeping uncontrollably and refusing to let go at that moment. Yen Changyuan's hand, which was fingering the green jade ring, paused slightly, his furrowed brow unconsciously relaxed a bit, and the look in his eyes as he gazed at me held a touch less wariness and a hint of undisguised admiration. Yen Qingzhan even raised an eyebrow slightly. He had always placed the family's reputation above all else. My composed demeanor, neither crying nor making a scene, and always knowing when to advance and when to retreat, clearly met his exacting standards for a noble lady of a Marquis' household. Sister, are you trying to provoke me with your words? Su Weiniing was the first to react. She clearly hadn't expected me to completely upend the act she'd prepared to establish her pitiful and vulnerable persona. She hurriedly wriggled free from Lady Tsong's embrace, knelt down with a thud beside me, and desperately grabbed my sleeve. I've only just arrived here and don't understand anything. If you storm off in a huff like this, won't outsiders point fingers at my back and say I'm crude and intolerant? She spoke so quickly, every word and phrase implying that I was using a strategy of feigned retreat to gain the upper hand and trap her in a compromising position. Unfortunately, she was too eager to seize the wealth and prestige right before her eyes. Her hands, slightly rough from years of farm work, clutched the sleeve of my fine yin brocade robe tightly, and she could not hide the greed and urgency in her eyes. I didn't pull my hand away from hers. I just turned my head slightly and looked at her with a gentle yet piercing gaze. Sister, you are mistaken. The Marquis' household lives in opulence and places the utmost importance on propriety and dignity. The distinction between legitimate and illegitimate children, and the order of seniority based on bloodline, are the very foundation upon which a distinguished family stands. I spoke clearly, neither subservient nor arrogant, deliberately raising my voice to ensure my father and elder brother at the head of the table could hear me perfectly clearly. To blur the lines of bloodline is a sign of chaos within the family. If I were to have the audacity to remain here, not only would I bring disgrace upon the Marquis' household, but I would also leave you, my sister, in a position that lacks both legitimacy and propriety. Do you really want the noble ladies of the capital to speak of the Dingyuan Marquis' household in the future, saying that our family cannot even distinguish the proper order of bloodlines? Upon hearing these words, Yen Chamuan slammed his hand down on the armrest and said in a deep voice, Tingxue is right. The bloodline of the Yen family must not be tainted, and the Yen family's rules must not be abandoned. Tingxue, that you possess such a sense of propriety and understanding of right and wrong proves that my upbringing of you in the Marquis' mansion was not in vain. But, Su Weiniang grew flustered. She'd originally just wanted to hypocritically keep me around as a prop to make herself look good, and to show off her magnanimity in the process, but she hadn't expected that in just a few sentences, I'd pinned her to the pillory off not knowing her place. She instinctively looked at Mrs. Rong, her eyes reddening again. Mother, I really wasn't trying to force my sister to leave. I was just afraid. I can't even read a few characters. If my sister leaves, how am I supposed to get by here in the Marquis' mansion? What's so hard about that? I smiled faintly, casually unfastening from my waist the milk-white jade pendant that symbolized my status as the legitimate daughter of the Marquis' household, along with a pair of tokens granting me authority over the inner courtyard's household affairs. I held them up with both hands and presented them to Su Weiniang. Now that you've returned home, these items should naturally be returned to their rightful owner. I've already had the ledgers of the Qinxiang courtyard sorted out, and the keys to the storerooms have all been inventoried and sealed away. Rest assured, little sister, the matron stewards of the Marquis' mansion are all seasoned veterans from the imperial palace. If you follow their lead, within 3 months at most, you'll have a thorough grasp of the mansion's rules. Upon seeing the smooth, translucent jade pendant and the pair of medallions symbolizing power, Su Weiniang's breathing instantly grew heavier. Her hand, which had originally intended to refuse once more, reached out uncontrollably, and in a near-snatching motion, she grabbed the items and clutched them tightly in her palm. The movement was so quick that my fingernail accidentally scraped the back of my hand, leaving a red mark. I furrowed my brow imperceptibly, said nothing, and simply slipped my hands behind my back without giving anything away. But this fleeting moment did not escape the notice of my eldest brother, Yen Qingzhan, who had been watching coldly from the sidelines. As he observed Su Weiniang clutching the jade pendant tightly, her anxious expression as if she feared I might change my mind, a flash of disgust crossed his eyes. Although Lady Roan loved her own flesh and blood dearly, seeing Su Weiniang act so thoughtlessly, a hint of embarrassment flashed across her face. She quickly tried to smooth things over, saying, all right, Tingxue is such a sensible girl. But as a young lady, where could you possibly go if you left the Marquis' mansion? Just have a side courtyard set aside for you here to stay for now. To the outside world, just say you're a distant cousin of the Yen family. Under no circumstances should you be left wandering the streets, giving people a reason to laugh at you for no reason. That's exactly what I was waiting to hear. Stepping down to make way for a more capable successor doesn't mean I'll actually go out on the streets to beg. Staying at the Marquis' mansion and watching her weave her own cocoon, step by step, that is the heart of this drama. I'll leave it entirely up to Mother, I said meekly, lowering my head to hide the coldness in my eyes. Then Tingxue will return at once to clear out the Qinxiang courtyard so that my younger sister can move into the most spacious courtyard in the Marquis' mansion tonight. to make up for the hardships she has endured over the years. When Su Weiniang heard the words "the most spacious courtyard," her eyes lit up astonishingly. She even forgot to keep up the feigned fragility she'd been putting on just moments before, and gazed longingly toward the gate, wishing she could grow wings and fly straight into the Qingxiang courtyard right then and there. I turned and walked away with a crisp, decisive stride, without the slightest hesitation. The Qingxiang courtyard, which I had treasured so dearly in my past life, where I had personally handpicked every single piece of furnishings, was now nothing more than an exquisite cage used to confine a greedy, ferocious beast. I had been back at the Qingxiang courtyard for less than half an hour. I had just finished packing a few plain, unremarkable garments when I heard the sound of commotion and footsteps outside the courtyard gate. Banksia, the personal maid, ran in from outside, her eyes red-rimmed with anger. "Miss, the matron in charge of the eldest young lady has sent people to urge us on. She says the eldest young lady has set her sights on that rosewood screen in the courtyard depicting 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix, and she wants us to work quickly and be careful not to damage her belongings." No sooner had Banksia finished speaking than a series of slightly hurried footsteps could be heard outside the door. Before I could reply, the door curtain was lifted, and Su Weiniang, accompanied by several unfamiliar maidservants, barged right in. She was wearing a crimson Hangzhou silk tunic with a friend-opening collar that Lady Rong had worn in her youth. Though the fabric was fine, it failed to lend any air of nobility to her figure, which had grown slightly gaunt from years of hard labor, and instead made her look like a maid who had stolen her mistress's clothes. The moment she stepped into the room, her gaze was drawn to the 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix rosewood screen, which stood as tall as a person. It then greedily swept over the rosewood carved four-poster bed and the dazzling array of jade hairpins on the dressing table. The intensity in her eyes was almost enough to set the room ablaze. "Haven't you finished packing yet, sister?" Su Weiniang looked away and forced a smile, though her voice betrayed a hint of impatience. "I didn't really want to come and rush you, but Mother was worried I wouldn't get used to living in the guest quarters, so she insisted I move in early to get familiar with the place. If you really can't bear to part with the things in this courtyard, I'm not unreasonable, I'll just use whatever you leave behind." As she spoke, she walked gracefully over to the screen and reached out to touch its exquisite carvings. Just then, the head housekeeper's voice rang out from outside the courtyard. "The crown prince and the princess are here." A sudden flash of alarm crossed Su Weiniang's eyes. The very moment Yan Xingzhan and the Rong family stepped through the doorway, she suddenly recoiled like a startled rabbit, instinctively tugging at Banksia's sleeve. "Ouch!" With a soft cry, Su Weiniang fell heavily onto the cold blue brick floor. Her eyes instantly filled with tears, and she looked up pitifully. "Sister, if you're angry that I took your status as the legitimate daughter, just hit me or scold me. Why did you have to order the maidservant to push me? If you really want this screen, I'll just give it up. Why go to such lengths to humiliate me?" Banksia turned deathly pale with fear and fell to her knees with a thud. "Please see reason. Madam, I didn't even touch the eldest young lady." She tripped and fell on her own. When Mrs. Rong saw her own daughter collapse to the ground, her eyes immediately welled up with tears of concern. She hurried over to help her up, then turned to look at me, her tone tinged with sternness. "Tingxue, you've always been such a sensible girl, why are you being so unforgiving today? Weiniang has endured 14 years of hardship away from home, and now that she's finally returned, what harm would it do to be a little more accommodating toward her?" I stood there quietly, making no hasty attempt to defend myself, my gaze passing over the angry Ms. Rong and resting directly on the face of my eldest brother, Yan Xingzhan. Yan Xingzhan said nothing, merely furrowing his brow slightly. His sharp, almond-shaped eyes first swept over Banksia, who was kneeling on the ground, trembling with fear. Then they glanced at Su Weiniang's skirt, which was spotless, not a speck of dust in sight, and finally, they settled on my composed face. With his depth of cunning, how could he fail to see through this utterly clumsy ploy to play the victim? I bent my knees slightly and bowed, then turned and walked over to the dressing table, picked up a rosewood box inlaid with mother of pearl, walked over to Ms. Rong, and slowly opened it. It was filled with dazzling Dongzhu pearls, headdresses set with red rubies in red gold, and jade bracelets of every color with exceptional translucency. "Please don't be angry, Mother. Banksia is just not very articulate, and she caused a misunderstanding with your younger sister. I spoke gently, as if I were truly just explaining a trivial matter. Tingxue isn't reluctant to leave this courtyard. Just now, Banksia and I were taking inventory. Every table, chair, vase, and jar in this room, including the folding screen you had your eye on, belongs to the Marquis' estate. Tingxue won't take a single item with her. I gently handed the box to Su Weiniang, seeing her eyes instantly drawn to the jewels. I continued, I've also neatly organized all the jewelry and headpieces Mother has bestowed upon me over the years. As you're new to the capital, sister, you'll inevitably be invited to banquets hosted by the noble young ladies of the city. Without a few presentable outfits, you're bound to be looked down upon. Although these are second-hand items, their designs are dignified and tasteful. Please accept them as a small token of my affection as your older sister. As soon as those words were spoken, the torrent of scolding Ms. Rong had been preparing instantly caught in her throat, and her expression became extremely complex, partly relieved by her own magnanimity toward me, and partly tinged with a faint sense of guilt for having wrongly accused me just moments before. Su Weiniang looked at the box filled with pearls and jewels, and her breathing quickened. How could she possibly pretend to be put out now? She snatched the box and clutched it tightly to her chest, forgetting even to offer a polite refusal. Weiniang! Yan Xingzhan suddenly spoke in a cold tone. Su Weiniang shuddered at the cold tone and instinctively looked at Yan Xingzhan. As the daughter of a distinguished family, you should remain unflappable even if Mount Tai were to collapse before your eyes. These are merely trinkets and ornaments. If word gets out that you're so shallow-minded, what will become of the Dazhou Marquis family's reputation? Yan Xingzhan's words stung like a barbed whip, causing Su Weiniang's face to flush crimson. Yan Xingzhan turned his gaze toward me, and the admiration in his eyes was even more pronounced than it had been in the main hall. Between a biological sister who would lie and put on a show over a few trinkets and an adopted sister who was calm, self-possessed, magnanimous, and proper, he had already weighed the matter carefully in his mind to determine which of them was better suited to uphold the Marquis' household's reputation. Brother, you're absolutely right. I've only just returned, so I can learn the rules little by little. I said at just the right moment to smooth things over. I then walked over to the writing desk, pulled a gold-embossed invitation from a stack of ledgers, and, as if by accident, let a few scattered drafts of poems fall to the floor. What is this? Yan Xingzhan, with his keen eyes, spotted the writing on the ground at a glance. I bent down to pick up the manuscript, gently brushed off the dust, and said calmly, This is a manuscript submitted by Mo Qinghan, the talented young scholar of the Mo family from South City, along with an invitation to the Qianlin poetry gathering to be held in 3 days. Upon hearing the name Mo Qinghan, Yan Xingzhan's eyes flickered slightly. I handed the invitation to Yan Xingzhan and said calmly, Young Master Mo is exceptionally talented and erudite. Even my father has privately praised his exquisite writing. He is sure to become a rising star in the imperial examinations, with a future full of boundless promise. In the past, as the legitimate daughter of the Marquis' household, it was naturally my duty to engage in such refined activities as befriending talented young men and selecting capable individuals for the Marquis' household. Now, however, I paused for a moment, turning my gaze to Su Weiniang, who was staring blankly at the jewelry box. A meaningful smile played at the corners of my mouth. Now, my dear sister, you are the legitimate heiress of this Marquis' household. The Qianlin poetry gathering brings together all the children of the capital's nobility. This opportunity to mingle with the rising elite and secure a favorable marriage for your future should naturally be left to you to decide. When Su Weiniang heard the phrases newly rich from the imperial examinations prospects, her eyes suddenly flashed with a greed more intense than the desire she felt upon seeing jewels. Is this Mo that Miss mentioned really that impressive? She asked tentatively, her voice betraying an eagerness she hadn't even noticed herself, so much so that she no longer bothered to maintain the feigned hurt she'd been putting on just moments ago. I lowered my gaze to hide the chill churning in my eyes. Mo Qinghan is more than just formidable. In my past life, when he was destitute, he had no qualms about using my dowry to grease the wheels and curry favor with the powerful. After his name appeared on the imperial examination list, he would coldly rebuke me for being stinking of money and acting crudely. only to turn around and spend romantic evenings with Su Weiniang under the cherry blossoms and moonlight, while he severed the tendons in my limbs and locked me in the woodshed. Beneath that face as smooth and lustrous as jade lay a heart more greedy and vicious than that of a jackal. Of course, when I looked up again, my expression had returned to one of warmth and openness. Although young Master Mo comes from a humble background, he writes exquisite prose. My father once declared that he is certain to have his name inscribed on the golden roll in the next spring imperial examinations. Many prominent families in the capital are now keeping a close eye on him. If we can be the first to forge a favorable relationship with him, it will be a tremendous asset in the future. This Qiongling poetry gathering is the perfect opportunity for him to make a name for himself. Upon hearing this, Mrs. Rong furrowed her brow slightly, stepped forward, and took Su Weiniang's hand, her voice full of concern. Tingxue, what you say makes sense, but Weiniang has just returned to the capital and doesn't even know a few characters. If she were to attend such gatherings of literati, wouldn't she be exposed as uneducated? It would be better to wait until your sister has mastered proper etiquette before considering this. Mother, you're simply letting your concern get the better of you, I said with a faint smile. My tone was gentle, yet every word struck a chord deep within Yan Xingzhan's heart. The Qiongling poetry gathering is ostensibly a poetry contest, but in reality, it's an occasion for the capital's nobility to observe the younger generation and build connections. The ladies usually admire the flowers and sip tea from behind the screens in the water pavilions. They don't need to compose poetry themselves. My younger sister is the legitimate daughter of the Marquis' household. If she were to remain hidden away in her inner chambers simply because she cannot read, outsiders would assume our household has something to hide, that we disdain our own flesh and blood. On the contrary, if she were to make a public appearance with grace and bestow kindness upon those scholars from humble backgrounds, outsiders would praise the Marquis' household for its generous family values and commend our legitimate daughter for her dignity. Yan Xingzhan's eyes flickered slightly. He was a man who valued only his own interests and never cared about the means he used to achieve them. Although the Marquis of Dingyuan's household now held a prominent position in the court, it lacked a few rising star civil officials who could speak with influence in the emperor's presence. The Marquis' household was determined to win over Mo Qinghan as a strategic pawn. In my previous life, when Yan Xingzhan saw that I had lost my reputation, he simply treated me as a favor to bestow upon Mo Qinghan. Now that the true heiress was in the picture, he naturally wouldn't be willing to marry Su Weiniang off to a man of lower status. However, having Su Weiniang use her title as the Marquis' legitimate daughter to bestow a favor upon Mo Qinghan and keep that penniless scholar hanging on was the most profitable deal of all. Tingxue has thought this through thoroughly, Yan Xingzhan said coldly, settling the matter once and for all. Since Weiniang is the legitimate daughter of the Marquis' household, she will have to adapt to such occasions sooner or later. You will take the invitation to the poetry gathering in 3 days' time. As for the etiquette and what to say, have Matron Jiaoying give her more intensive guidance over the next couple of days. Upon hearing the crown prince's words, Su Weiniang's eyes immediately lit up with wild joy. She forced herself to suppress the smile tugging at the corners of her mouth, curtsied, and said in a voice so sweet it trembled, Weiniang will certainly not disappoint my elder brother and sister's expectations. I will definitely cultivate a good relationship with this Mo and will not bring dishonor to the Marquis' household. Seeing how eager she was to climb the social ladder, I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Mo Qinghan is an extremely arrogant yet deeply insecure man. He hates it when others look down on him and offer charity. Yet he craves the favor of the powerful and influential. In my past life, I gave everything to protect his pride, only to end up shattered to pieces. In this life, let Su Weiniang, with her half-baked arrogance and obvious scheming, go torment that hypocrite and let them torment each other. I folded the invitation neatly and placed it in Su Weiniang's arms, where she was holding the jewelry box. Then I took a step back and curtsied to Yan Xingzhan and Mrs. Rong. In that case, the handover of the items from Qingshan courtyard is complete. Tingxue will now move to Luomei residence on the west side so as not to disturb my younger sister's rest. Ms. Rong watched as I walked out with only my maid, Bangxia, carrying 2 light bundles. Her lips twitched as if she wanted to say something, but she was ultimately drawn back to the present by Su Weiniang's sweet, high-pitched call of mother. The moment I stepped out of the gates of the incense courtyard, The cold late autumn wind swept over me, yet it blew away the pent-up melancholy that had weighed on my heart for 2 lifetimes. The 3 days passed in the blink of an eye, and on the day of the Qionglin poetry gathering, the area outside Qingyuan was filled early on with the red-wheeled carriages and ornate canopies of various noble families. In the end, Ms. Roan couldn't bear to let Su Weiniang handle the situation alone. So under the pretext of me cousin showing her the way, she squeezed me into the Dingyuan Marquis' carriage as well. Su Weiniang didn't seem to mind at all. On the contrary, she was quite pleased. Today she was wearing an extremely flashy brocade skirt embroidered with a pattern of 100 children, gold and silver threaded clouds, and rui symbols. On her head, she had practically pinned every piece of the red ruby inlaid, pure gold headdress from the box I'd given her as the carriage jolted along. The pearls and jewels clinked together, producing a crisp yet chaotic clatter. She cast a sidelong glance at the simple, moon-white, front-fastening tunic and skirt I was wearing, a hint of condescending pity flickering in her eyes. She probably thought that bringing along a down-and-out fake heiress like me would better highlight her status as the true legitimate daughter. Now the center of everyone's attention, I kept my eyes downcast, holding the hand warmer with both hands, pretending not to notice, and letting her bask in her self-satisfaction like a pheasant eager to show off its feathers. Qingyuan was built along the water's edge, while the men recited poetry and composed prose in pavilions along the meandering stream. The women, separated by a slab of taihu stone and layers of beaded curtains, sipped tea and admired the flowers in the lakeside pavilions. Though men and women shared the same garden, their spaces were strictly segregated. This was the unspoken rule observed by distinguished families. We had barely taken our seats at the waterside pavilion when several noble young ladies I knew well cast inquisitive glances in our direction. Seeing that I had taken a seat of lesser prominence, while a new face, adorned in gold and silver and appearing slightly self-conscious, had taken the seat of honor at the Marquis' table, the others, though they said nothing outright, let their whispered conversations, hidden behind their round fans, betray a certain tacit disdain. So that's young Master Mo, the one everyone in the front courtyard has been buzzing about? Someone let out a startled gasp in a hushed voice. Peering through a gap in the beaded curtain, I saw a scholar in a blue robe, faded from repeated washings, standing in the breeze inside the Lu Shang pavilion on the opposite bank. Holding a wolf hair brush, he composed a 7-character regulated verse in the blink of an eye. The man had well-defined features and an air of aloofness and nobility. Amidst the crowd of young men from prominent families dressed in brocaded robes and fine garments, he truly stood out like a crane among chickens. It was indeed a Mo Qinghan. In my past life, I, too, was beguiled by his fearless and unyielding exterior, all seen through this beaded curtain. Back then, he had won first place in a poetry contest. Yet a few spoiled young aristocrats secretly mocked him for his humble origins, suggesting he couldn't even afford the Xian paper from Qingxin Hall. Fearing I might hurt his pride, I specifically had someone, in the name of the Marquis' household, slip the finest writing implements and silver notes into a rare, one-of-a-kind calligraphy manual and secretly deliver it to his residence. I didn't even dare to phrase my invitation too strongly, for fear of insulting his noble dignity. But all he got in return was that remark he made after rising to power. All pretense and hidden schemes. What a wonderful poem! Such a masterpiece deserves to be rewarded, came the admiring voice of the eldest son of the crown princess, who was presiding over the poetry gathering, from across the river. Upon hearing this, Su Weiniang's eyes lit up. Before coming here, she had received advice from Yan Xingzhan, and her mind was filled with thoughts of befriending the new elite and bestowing favors to win them over. In her rural worldview, shaped by the past 14 years of her life, bestowing favors simply meant showering people with money. Ignoring the tugging of matron Jiaoying behind her, she eagerly pulled a heavy money pouch from her sleeve and shoved it into the hands of the maid standing beside her. Her voice sounded particularly sharp and jarring in the quiet water pavilion. "Hurry! Go deliver this to that scholar surnamed Mo on the other side of the river. Tell him it's a gift from the legitimate daughter of the Dingyuan Marquis' household, and that he'd better serve our Marquis' household faithfully from now on." As soon as those words were spoken, the entire pavilion fell instantly silent. The noble young ladies even stopped fanning themselves, staring at Su Weiniang as if she were a madwoman. For an unmarried young lady from a distinguished family to publicly bestow nothing of a vulgar nature upon a man from outside her circle, and to do so in a tone as if she were ordering him around, is not merely a breach of etiquette. It is an act of dragging the prestige of the Marquis' household and that scholar through the mud. The commotion on the other side of the room also came to a halt due to the maid's abrupt intrusion. The maid, who had never been trained to handle such grand occasions, actually handed the pouch filled with ingots of red gold to Mo Qinghan right in front of everyone and, like a parrot, loudly repeated Su Weiniang's words. Through the curtain, I could clearly see Mo Qinghan's face, as smooth and lustrous as jade, turn the color of a pig's liver in an instant. With the veins on his temples bulging one by one, his facade of extreme self-doubt mixed with extreme arrogance was shattered to pieces by those gold ingots. With a loud thud, Mo Qinghan swung her hand backward, and the pouch slammed down hard on the stone table, scattering the gold coins all over the floor. The Marquis of Dingyuan's household sure does act high and mighty, though I, Mo Qinghan, am but a man of humble means. I was raised on the teachings of the sages. How could I possibly endure such humiliation at the hands of someone tainted by the stench of money? Mo Qinghan trembled with rage as he pointed at the maid and shouted, "Go back and tell your mistress. I, Mo Qinghan, do not sell my poetry." A murmur immediately broke out among the male guests, and their glances toward the Marquis of Dingyuan's mansion were filled with contempt. The noble ladies in the pavilion could no longer contain themselves. One after another, they covered their mouths with handkerchiefs and began to snicker softly. Su Weiniang had never experienced such a scene before. She felt as if the laughter around her were needles pricking her face. Frustrated and angry, she lost her head in the heat of the moment, abruptly pulled aside the beaded curtain in front of her, and, without a second thought, rushed to the edge of the corridor, pointing across the river and shouting at the top of her lungs, "You ungrateful scholar! I am the legitimate daughter of the Marquis of Dingyuan's household. Giving you gold as a favor, why are you acting so high and mighty?" That angry outburst completely tore away the last shred of decency from the Marquis of Dingyuan's mansion, and it also caused the matron in charge of the Grand Princess's household to turn cold. As she strode directly toward our pavilion by the water, Auntie Chang, who attended the Grand Princess, wore a stern expression and walked with steady, measured steps, though she appeared to harbor not a trace of anger. The aura of authority she had cultivated over years of serving those in high positions silenced everyone in the water pavilion. The eldest young lady of the Marquis' mansion certainly has quite the air of grandeur. Matron Chang came to a halt outside the beaded curtain, not even deigning to look directly at Su Weiniang, her tone as cold as a blade tempered in ice. His Highness says that Qingyuan is a place of refinement, not a marketplace. Since the young lady believes that gold and silver can buy all the literary works in the world, this refined gathering by the meandering stream surely won't be to her liking. Attendant, prepare a carriage for the Dingyuan Marquis' manor. This is a blatant order to leave. Su Weiniang's arrogant demeanor was instantly doused by this bucket of cold water, leaving not a trace of it behind. No matter how little she understood the rules, she could still hear the rebuke and order to leave in Matron Chang's words. Her face turned as white as paper. She instinctively took half a step back and looked at me as if pleading for help. I rose at the appropriate moment, lowered my gaze, and bowed respectfully to Matron Chang. "Please convey our apologies to Her Highness the Crown Princess on behalf of the Marquis' household. My younger sister has been away for many years. Having just returned home, she is not yet familiar with the etiquette of the capital and acted inappropriately, disturbing your distinguished guests. As her eldest sister, Tingxue failed to admonish her in time and therefore cannot escape blame either. We will return to the mansion at once to reflect on our mistakes in seclusion." With these words, I not only preserved the last shred of dignity for the Ho family, but also unhesitatingly exposed Su Weiniang's rustic manner and lack of propriety to all the noble young ladies present. Only then did Matron Chang give me a proper look. Her expression softened slightly, and she nodded slightly. The second young lady is a sensible young woman. Today, this old servant has witnessed two different aspects of the Dingyuan Marquis' household's upbringing. Please, go. In the carriage on the return journey, it was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Su Weiniang huddled in the corner, clutching the handkerchief in her hand tightly. The ruby-studded, crimson gold hairpin on her head clinked softly with the carriage's swaying. a sound that now struck her as particularly ironic. Every now and then, she shot me a furious glance out of the corner of her eye. She was clearly racking her brain for an excuse, preparing to strike first once we returned to the manor. I held the hand warmer in my hands and closed my eyes to rest. Yet deep down I felt a cold, quiet satisfaction. In my previous life, for the sake of the Marquis family's reputation, I went out of my way to cover for her, afraid that she would be ridiculed. Now that I've been given a second chance at life, I finally understand that mud is just mud if you force her up against the wall. She'll only drag you down into the mire with her. No sooner had the carriage pulled up in front of the Marquis' mansion than the steward hurried out to meet them, his face dark with worry. "Miss. Second miss. The Marquis and the Crown Prince are in a terrible rage in the main hall. They've asked you both to go there immediately upon your return." No sooner had she stepped into the main hall than a pastel-colored teacup skimmed past Su Weiniang's skirt and shattered, splashing scalding tea all over her foot. "You good for nothing. Just look at what you've done today." Yen Song, the Marquis of Dingyuan, his face ashen, pointed at Su Weiniang and railed at her. "The good name I, Yen Song, have spent half my life painstakingly building in the imperial court has been completely shattered today by those few ingots of gold of yours. Now the whole capital is abuzz with rumors that the Dingyuan Marquis household is abusing its power to humiliate a scholar from a humble background with the stench of money. How am I supposed to face the court tomorrow?" Yen Qinghan sat to one side, his face as still as water. His almond-shaped eyes, usually so shrewd and calculating, were now filled with a menacing glint as he stared coldly at Su Weiniang. Su Weiniang was so frightened by the commotion that she fell to her knees with a thud. Tears welled up in her eyes instantly, and she pointed at me, sobbing, "Father, elder brother, it's not my fault. It was my older sister. She's the one who said that Mo Qinghan had a bright future ahead of him, and told me to befriend him, win him over, and do him favors. I was just following my older sister's instructions. She clearly set me up on purpose to frame me." "Oh." Yen Qingzhan's gaze turned toward me like that of a venomous snake, tinged with a hint of scrutiny. "Tingxue, is what Weiniang said true?" I walked calmly into the hall, lifted my skirt, and knelt with my back held straight. "Eldest brother, please hear me out. Tingxue did indeed tell me that young Master Mo is exceptionally talented, and that if we could forge a good relationship with him, he would surely be a great asset to the Marquis' household in the future. However, the favor Tingxue spoke of was for me too. In the name of the Marquis' household, either present him with a rare copy of a travelogue or speak highly of him before the Grand Princess, thereby preserving his reputation as a scholar of noble integrity." I paused, casting a sympathetic glance at Su Weiniang, who stood frozen in shock beside me, and sighed softly. "A few days ago, when you first returned to the manor, you took a liking to some jewelry and trinkets from the Qinxiang courtyard. Tingxue assumed you were simply expressing a young lady's fondness for pearls and jewels. I never imagined, however, that you would display such a merchant's manner at a gathering of distinguished families, publicly using gold and silver to reward a haughty and arrogant scholar. It was my oversight. I forgot that you have not yet learned the etiquette of socializing among distinguished families. I humbly ask father and my eldest brother to punish me." Every word of this hit the nail on the head. Not only did it expose Su Weiniang's shallow-mindedness and insatiable greed, but it also thoroughly characterized her actions today as the foolishness of someone who's beyond redemption. Yen Qingzhan's expression changed completely. The hint of tolerance that had once existed in his gaze toward Su Weiniang, due to their blood ties, had now completely given way to contempt for a fool. He was an extremely pragmatic man. Su Weiniang's outburst today had not only ruined the Marquis' household's reputation but had also driven Mo Qinghan, a rising star with immense potential, completely into opposition to the Marquis' household. "Enough. You're as stupid as a pig, yet you still dare to slander others." Yen Qingzhan coldly cut off Su Weiniang's tearful cries as she tried to argue further. He turned to look at the Marquis of Dingyuan, whose brow was deeply furrowed, and lowered his voice, his tone tinged with a hint of cold calculation. "Father, today's incident has already escalated. Mo Qinghan is narrow-minded and extremely concerned about his reputation. Having suffered such a humiliating defeat today, if he is actually allowed to pass the imperial examination, He will surely become our mortal enemy in the imperial court. If we wish to quell the rumors circulating outside and turn this humiliation into a positive story, there is only one way. Yan Xingzhan's voice rang out in the deathly silent main hall, devoid of any warmth, as if he were speaking of an inanimate object. A marriage alliance. As long as the Marquis' household leaks word to the outside world that Wanning had long heard of young Master Mo's reputation for talent while living in the countryside, and that today's events were merely the rash infatuation of a young girl experiencing her first stirrings of love, and that the Marquis' household, eager to nurture talent, is willing to marry off its eldest daughter, then this reputation for abusing power to bully others will naturally be transformed into a romantic tale of selecting a husband from among the examination candidates. I won't marry him. Su Weiying let out a shrill, heart-wrenching scream and struggled violently to her feet, the hair ornament on her head swaying wildly as she looked like a woman with disheveled hair gone mad. I'm the true heiress of the Marquis' household. I've endured 14 years of hardship, why should I, the moment I return, be forced to marry a penniless scholar who can't even afford Xian paper? Big brother, father, you can't treat me this way. Silence! The Marquis of Dingyuan slammed his hand down on the rosewood table so hard that the tea leaves in the cup jumped. His cloudy yet shrewd eyes fixed intently on Su Weiying, revealing undisguised calculation and coldness. Do you think it's so easy to be the legitimate daughter of the Marquis of Dingyuan's household? You've brought utter disgrace upon the Marquis' household today. If I don't use your marriage to silence the public outcry, the Censorate's memorial will have me confined to my quarters for self-reflection by tomorrow. This matter is not for you to decide. Ms. Rong, who had long since lost her composure, hugged the sobbing Su Weiying tenderly and looked imploringly at Yan Xingzhan. Your Highness, Weiying has only just returned. Mo Qinghan is nothing more than a commoner from a poor family. Wouldn't this be a great injustice to your sister? Does mother really think Mo Qinghan is just some commoner? Yan Xingzhan snorted coldly, his gaze darkening. Never mind that he's highly likely to take first place in next month's imperial examinations, just consider that he made an appearance before the Grand Princess today. If we don't strike first, once he rises to power, he'll surely turn on the Marquis' household with a vengeance. Trading a troublemaking daughter for a rising star with a promising future, don't you see the logic in that? Mother? I knelt quietly at the foot of the dais, lowering my gaze to hide the mockery churning in my eyes. Look, this is the true face of the Dingyuan Marquis' household. In my previous life, when my reputation lay in tatters, they treated me with the same haughty disdain, using me as a pawn and dumping me on Mo Qinghan as if I were a piece of trash. Now, even with the legitimate heiress they've longed to bring back, the moment family interests are at stake, she still cannot escape the fate of being reduced to a commodity with a price tag. Father, please calm down. Elder brother. I raised my head at just the right moment, my tone gentle and sincere, as if I were acting entirely in the best interests of the Marquis' household. Although young Master Mo is haughty and arrogant, he is not without worldly wisdom. If father were to intervene personally, offer a generous gift, and then introduce him to 1 or 2 tutors before the spring imperial examinations, I am certain young Master Mo would understand the Marquis' household's good intentions. As for my younger sister, once young Master Mo's name appears on the golden list, she will be the glorious wife of the top scholar. How could she possibly feel wronged? Upon hearing this, a hint of approval flashed in Yan Xingzhan's eyes. Shui is absolutely right. What Mo Qinghan lacks most right now is the money and connections needed to pave his way through the imperial examinations. He's a smart man. He knows how to make the right choice. Upon hearing this, Su Weiying completely collapsed into Rong's arms. Her eyes filled with bitterness and despair. Though she was simple-minded, she vaguely understood that no one in this family would ever care about her tears. Events unfolded exactly as Yan Xingzhan had anticipated. In just half a month, the Marquis' household had swiftly and decisively completed the formalities for the betrothal and exchange of marriage contracts. Mo Qinghan's so-called unbreakable pride ultimately bowed in the face of the 2,000 taels of silver sent by Yan Xingzhan and the letter of recommendation from the era's foremost Confucian scholar. He publicly declared his gratitude to the Marquis for recognizing his talent and expressed that he was both flattered and overwhelmed by his admiration for Su Weiying. Adopting the hypocritical demeanor of an upright gentleman, he managed to completely dispel the rumors circulating in the capital about the Marquis' household abusing its power to bully others. Su Weiying, on the other hand, was completely confined to the Qinxiang courtyard. Every day, aside from embroidering her wedding gown, she would hysterically smash things. Mrs. Rong, heartbroken over her biological daughter, could do nothing but go to even greater lengths to fill her dowry with rare treasures, even assigning her several of the Marquis's most profitable shops. I watched all of this unfold with a detached eye. Even when the Rong family was taking inventory of the dowry, I casually suggested that they set aside some extra cash for Su Weiniang, saying, "Young Master Mo will inevitably need money to navigate the bureaucratic world in the future. In my past life, Mo Qinghan used my dowry to secretly bribe Li, the vice minister in charge of this year's imperial examinations, thereby securing the top-scoring essay that made a sensation throughout the capital. He thought he'd pulled it off without a trace, but little did he know that while drunk in his study, he'd boasted to me in person about his underhanded tactics. In this life, without my wholehearted support, the silver and money that Su Weiniang sent over, laced with resentment, naturally became his only lifeline. With the spring imperial examinations approaching as scheduled next month, Mo Qinghan, thanks to the efforts of the Marquis's household, entered the examination hall in great style. On the day the exam results were announced, the sky over the capital was overcast, with signs of an approaching storm. In the main hall of the mansion, Su Weiniang, in a rare display, had donned a vibrant xiangfei-colored silk gown, her face betraying an unmistakable mix of anxiety and anticipation. Over the past half-month, she seemed to have resigned herself to her fate, pinning all her hopes on Mo Qinghan winning first place in the imperial examinations so that she could hold her head high among the noble young ladies of the prominent families. Yan Xingzhan and the Marquis of Dingyuan were also seated at the head of the table, though their sipping of tea seemed somewhat distracted. I sat in the armchair at the very end of the row, picked up the cup of tea that was growing cold beside me, gently skimmed the foam from the surface, and listened to the faint sound of a bronze gong announcing good news drifting from the far end of the long street. The sound of the gong announcing the good news grew louder as it drew nearer, piercing through the gloomy curtain of rain and reverberating against the blue bricks of the main hall of the Ho family mansion. Ding, 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 great news! Wonderful news! The butler stumbled and scrambled over the threshold, holding a bright red announcement high in the air, his face beaming with joy. Your Grace, young master, our son-in-law has passed the imperial examination. He's the top-ranked scholar. That announcement was like a soothing balm, instantly dispelling the tense atmosphere in the hall. The Marquis of Dingyuan let out a long sigh of relief. His hand trembled slightly as he lifted his teacup, and even Yan Xingzhan's face, which was usually somber, finally broke into a smile of relief. Su Weiniang was so overcome with excitement that she jumped to her feet, the golden hairpin on her head swaying violently. Gripping the hem of her dazzling xiangfei-colored silk gown, she took 2 steps at a time to reach me, her eyes brimming with the fervor of vindication and contempt. Tingxue, did you hear that? The top scholar. I'm about to become a first-rank lady of imperial decree. You, a pretender who's usurped my rightful place, no matter how much you put on airs in everyday life. Aren't you now reduced to kneeling at my feet, gazing up at my glory and wealth? I sat in the round armchair, not even lifting my eyelids, simply gazing quietly at the completely cold, leftover tea in my cup, a faint smile playing at the corners of my lips. Yes, my little sister's wealth and glory truly know no bounds, I murmured softly. No sooner had the words left his mouth than a blood-curdling roar suddenly rang out from outside the mansion gates, not the sound of firecrackers heralding good news, but the grim clang of heavy armor clashing. Immediately afterward, with a thunderous crash, the vermilion-lacquered gate of the Marquis's mansion, a symbol of a century of prestige, was violently smashed open from the outside. The butler's laughter stopped abruptly. He turned to look and was so terrified that he instantly collapsed to the ground. A vast number of genii Wei, clad in flying fish robes and with embroidered spring daggers strapped to their waists, surged into the courtyard like a black tide, instantly surrounding the entire main hall. The cold glint of their blades flickered in the gloomy light of the sky, stinging everyone's eyes. The commander of the genii Wei, his face as cold as iron, strode into the hall, the bright yellow imperial edict in his hand resembling a death warrant. The imperial guard is investigating by imperial decree. Yan Song, Marquis of Dingyuan, receive this decree. The Marquis of Dingyuan's legs gave way, and he and Yan Xingjian both knelt on the ground. Su Weiying, terrified, turned deathly pale and scrambled to hide behind Mrs. Roan. The commander coldly unfurled the imperial edict, his voice booming like a great bell. By the mandate of heaven, the emperor decrees, upon investigation of the examination fraud case, it has been found that candidate Mo Qinghan secretly bribed the chief examiner, Vice Minister Li, with a colossal sum, a crime that cannot be forgiven. The silver used for this bribery originated entirely from the house of the Marquis of Dingyuan. The Marquis's household has flouted the laws of the land, manipulated the imperial examinations, and formed factions for personal gain, acts that are truly heinous and unforgivable. It is hereby ordered that, effective immediately, the title of Marquis of Dingyuan be revoked, the principal offender and his entire family be imprisoned in the celestial prison, and their assets be confiscated. So decreed. Impossible. Yan Xingjian jerked his head up, his eyes bulging with fury, and protested hoarsely, "Your Honor, please see clearly. The Marquis's household had absolutely no part in this fraud. Mo Qinghan's actions have nothing to do with the Yan family. No connection at all?" The commander snorted derisively and waved his hand. Immediately, the officers behind him slammed several heavy wooden crates onto the ground. The lids flew open, and gleaming silver ingots tumbled out. The commander drew his Sichuan sword, hoisted a silver ingot with the tip of the blade, and pointed it directly at Yan Xingjian's brow. The total amount of ill-gotten gains seized from Vice Minister Li's residence was 10,000 taels. The bottom of every silver ingot is clearly stamped with the private seal of the Dingyuan Marquis family bank. This silver was withdrawn in cash from the dowry shop belonging to your so-called true daughter. With both witness testimony and physical evidence at hand, does the Crown Prince still intend to make excuses? Su Weiying stared intently at the silver ingot engraved with Thesiel, as if all the blood had been drained from her body in an instant. She whipped her head around to look at me, her eyes bulging out of their sockets. "It was you! You were the one who told Mother that day that Mo Qinghan would need cash to grease the wheels of the bureaucracy in the future. You deliberately had Mother set these marked government silver ingots aside for me." I slowly stood up, smoothed out the non-existent wrinkles in my moon-white tunic and skirt, and met her face, which was contorted with extreme fear, with a calm gaze. "In my past life, to protect Mo Qinghan, I personally melted down my dowry into unmarked gold leaves, leaving not even the slightest trace for outsiders to exploit. But in this life, Su Weiying is haughty and arrogant, eager to buy her way to status with money. Yan Xingjian is short-sighted and opportunistic, seeking only to use silver to quickly secure an ally in the imperial court. They simply do not understand that in the abyss of power, every copper coin engraved with a name is a noose around one's neck. I don't need to take matters into my own hands to frame them. I just need to go with the flow and watch as their greed comes back to haunt them. "My sister, you are mistaken," I said in a cold, clear voice that cut through the dead silence. "The dowry was counted out by Mother. The silver was sent to the Mo household by you, and this shortcut to climbing the social ladder was paved for you personally by Father and my eldest brother. How could Tingxue, a mere orphaned girl confined to the inner quarters, possibly influence the decisions of the Marquis's household?" Just then, there was another commotion outside the door. Mo Qinghan was being held down in the muddy water by two members of the Imperial Guard. Gone was his usual aloof and proud demeanor. His hair was disheveled, his face covered in blood, and he was screaming at the top of his lungs toward the hall. "It was Yan Xingjian who forced me. The Dingyuan Marquis's household used the marriage as leverage and gave me silver notes to grease the wheels. I've been framed." The dog-eat-dog drama finally reached its climax at that moment. Unable to bear such a blow, the Marquis of Dingyuan's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed, falling into a deep unconsciousness. The piercing wails of Lady Roan mingled with Su Weiying's desperate screams, shattering the dignity of this century-old Marquis's mansion to pieces. The commander waved his hand impatiently. "Take them all away!" The Imperial Guards pounced like wolves and tigers, chaining Yan Xingjian and Su Weiying together. When two captains approached me holding the chains, I calmly pulled a document bearing a bright red fingerprint from my sleeve and handed it to the commander. "Your Honor, please hear me out. I am Shen Tingxue, an orphan from the countryside. Half a month ago, the true heiress of the Marquis' household was restored to her rightful place. The Marquis has already convened a family assembly, removed my name from the Yen family genealogy, and revoked my right to bear the Yen surname. I am now merely a temporary guest residing at the Marquis' estate. This is the official document of disinheritance, bearing the official seal of Shen Tingxue Prefecture. The commander took the document, carefully examined the official seal on it, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. He gave me a long, penetrating look, sheathed his sword, and raised his hand to signal the captain to step back. Since you have severed ties with your family, you are no longer a member of the Yen clan. You are not included in the imperial edict's list of those to be arrested. Step aside. I bowed slightly and, under Su Weiniang's gaze filled with jealousy and despair, slowly stepped over the threshold of the main hall. Thunder rumbled in the spring sky, and a fine, steady rain washed away the mud from the bluestone pavers. I opened a plain oil paper umbrella, leaving the cries and curses from within the home mansion far behind me. At the end of the alley, sunlight broke through the clouds. It was a brand new world, belonging solely to Shen Tingxue. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Thank you.